Hi guys, welcome to Unit 2, Lesson 5, Reflections Across the X or Y axis. Okay, so a couple things. One, you might want to screenshot this, your screen right now with this information here, or pause the video and write all of that down. That's even better. Anytime you can write something down, your brain is going to remember it better than just screenshotting it, right? But when we think of the word reflection, think of the word, think of a mirror image, right? So this is not a perfect example, but my hands, right, would be a mirror image of each other. If I were to fold right along that line of symmetry, which is between my thumbs, then they line up, okay? But in math, they would line up perfectly, right? My hands are not perfect, but that's a pretty close example, okay? So think mirror image when we're thinking that it's gonna flip over. Where as opposed to rotations, which we'll be working on more as well. So the x-axis, that's your horizontal axis. So I drew just a little picture just as a reminder. If you are reflecting across the x-axis, the y value is going to change, okay? If you are reflecting across the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, that's the one that goes up and down, if you are reflecting across that one, then the x value changes, okay? So that's why it's important to screenshot or write down, because we don't want to get those mixed up, all right? So first example, number 1, and this is also number 1 from your practice on page 23. This is a longer lesson that they have written out for you. So mine looks a little smaller than the one they give you on your computer, so it'll look a little more zoomed in. But let's go ahead and read through it. It says, Andrea has to find a third point, C, to form a triangle on the coordinate plane shown. She is told that the coordinates of its reflection, point C prime, remember whenever there's that little tick mark it means prime, okay, or it means the second version of the original point. So she is told that the coordinates of its reflection point, C prime, across the x-axis are 2, -2. What are the coordinates of C? So let's go ahead and plot C prime first, which is this point here, 2, -2. All right? So from the origin, we would go to over 2 to the right and then down 2. That right there is C prime, okay? Well, if it's being reflected across the x-axis, right? Well, this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis. If I'm going across here, right, I'm flipping it over this way, well, the x value doesn't change. That's going to stay true at this 2, but instead we would go up to +2 on the y value. So that's where I said earlier, if you reflect across the x-axis, the y value changes. If you reflect across the y-axis, the x value changes. So this right here, if we were to fold this piece of paper along the x-axis, right, these two, if drawn perfectly, would land right on top of each other. So our final answer, though, let's go back to our question. What are the coordinates of C? Well, that's this one here. That's the one that we just drew. This is point C, and that is at +2, 2. Okay? So we would say C, 2, 2 is one way that you could write it. Let me see what it looks like on yours. They already have the parentheses for you on your practice. You would just type in the 2 and the 2. Okay? So that's your final answer. All right? That's not bad, right? I don't think it's bad. I kind of like this stuff. I think it's fun. It's kind of like solving a puzzle. Okay, number 2. Let's see here. I forget which one this is. Let me see. Okay, this is number 2 from your practice. So just the first 2 problems are going to be done for you. So number 2, triangle ABC, this one here, is reflected across the y-axis. So from here, over here, we're getting to this one, to produce triangle DEF. DEF. Which segment on DEF is congruent to the segment BC? Well, you can probably figure this out on your own, but we really haven't talked about like writing segment names and things like that, so I wanted to make sure that we touched on that. So segment, when it refers to a segment, it means a line segment, which is also one of the sides of the triangle. Well, we're looking for the one that is congruent. There's another word we need to make sure that we know. Congruent is like a fancy word to say equals to. But we're looking for the one that is equal to BC. Well, BC's right here. Sorry, I know I'm leaning over kind of funny. This is BC. Well, which one is congruent to that on the other one? Well, if we flip it over, boop, right? That's this one here, right? It's the hypotenuse in both of them. They just happen to be reflected of each other, right? So they're facing the opposite directions, right? But this would be your final answer. And to say that, you would say that that is segment, and you just need to fill in EF. That is your final answer, EF. And that's it. Okay? Right, like I said, not too bad. All right, number 3, last one for today. This is number 1 from your quick check. Triangle ABC is reflected across the x-axis. If the coordinates of the original shape are A, -4, -1, B, -5, -2, and C, -10, -1, what are the coordinates of A prime, B prime, and C prime? So the primes represent the coordinates after we do the reflection. Now, they don't have it written down, they don't have it drawn out, and I don't have it drawn out, right? But we don't need it to be drawn out in order for us to figure it out, because we know our rule, right? So if it's being reflected across the x-axis, that means my y values are changing. And they're just flipping from one sign to the other. If they're positive, now they're going to be negative. If they're negative, then they're going to be positive after the reflection. So we could list, let's see, I'm trying to think how I could. I was trying to think of some fancy organization I could do real quick, but that's okay. If we have A, and we have -4, -1, after the reflection, for A prime, we went across the x-axis, so my y value is changing from, in this case, negative to positive. So my x value stays the same, but then my y value is now +1. For B, we had -5, -2 as our coordinate. After the reflection, B prime is now going to be -5, +2. For C, it was at -10, -1. After the reflection, C prime becomes -10, +1. Okay? So this is what you're looking for in your answer. Okay? So make sure to find that. On mine, personally, that doesn't mean it will be the same for you. That's answer B. Okay? So just be on the lookout for that, but just check every single one of them that you have it correct. Alright? Alright, and as always, if you need extra help, let me know.